Still good morning. Thank you for all of you being here on a wonderful sunny day. I know the night was, I can hear the rain at night time. My name is Janine Perón. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Latino Progress, also known for many years as the Puerto Rican Forum. I'm so very delighted to mention that in October of 1978, 40 years ago, the center opened its doors to the community 40 years ago because there was a growing, emerging Latino population, mostly Puerto Ricans back then. 40 years later, we are the majority in the city of Hartford, the majority of the population, followed by African Americans, and then our general other populations that we have. But 40 years later, we were here to help the community to prosper, and we're still working on sadly the same issues of 40 years ago. First, I will say that in a very short time we put this event together, and I'm very pleased because one of the things that we are doing at the center is working in water education, getting out the vote. And when I heard that we had the opportunity to team with the League of Women Voters to do an event, I said, let's do it. It's fantastic. We have a great team in about 4 weeks. Everyday Democracy is working with us in getting out the vote. And I mentioned to them of the opportunity, and Sandra Rodriguez, who is here, she loved the idea of getting people together to talk about what's going on, a little bit different from other people out there that are doing forums with the candidates. I said, there are ballot questions that we need to talk about. So Sandy loved the idea, and then she dragged her boss, Val Ramos, for Everyday Democracy, and then we have Kate Kennedy from the League of Women Voters, dragging our stellar student into the mix, which I'm pleased to mention later on. I just wanted to say that also I have the team from the center and the team of a program that we are very pleased to have for almost a year now. It's called Transport Hartford Academy, and one of the ballots is about transportation, so we link get out the vote to the ballot issues that it will be impacting the economy of the state. And I just wanted to mention one of the things that really we know about the economy is that we are in a difficult time. There's no way to deny that. But one of the key components of moving the economy forward is the community that we serve. Our community is eager to be there, be part of the economy. And we have been doing that for 40 years with training and education. We do a lot of youth development programs, my favorites. We do a lot of tour education. We work for people in reentry. And we actually, since 2015, we started working on transportation issues. We have the only bicycle shop in the city of Hartford. And the idea is one of the barriers to our community is transportation. And there's nothing better than mixed transportation with youth. And we educate the youth in fixing their own bikes, and they will have access to bikes for adults also. We provide bikes to adults so they can go to work. Yes, I'm making sure I'm not forgetting anything. In 2011, we added the second name, Center for Latino Progress, to the Puerto Rican Forum because one of the things that I must say, now the Latino is the majority, but no longer the Puerto Rican is still the majority, but there are a lot of other communities that are moving into Hartford that need immigration services. And in 2011, we became authorized by the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice to provide legal immigration services. And with that, we needed to modify our name. That's when we add the Latino name to the organization, because as you know, Puerto Ricans don't need immigration services, but we help a lot of people that they do. As I go along, one of the things that we are very passionate about is getting out the vote. We have partnered with NALEO, the National Association of Elected Officials, to do being a 1-800 number before. We partnered with the Hispanic Federation to hustle people to go to the schools and vote. This year we got a grant from the Hartford Foundation with the same supporting our work as well. And it's very important, more than ever, that the voice of our community is out there. And we are trying very, very hard to get people to go vote. We are educating about the issues, we are registering them, and we're going to hustle them in November 6th. With that said, one of the things that is very, very great is in 40 years we have a lot of people coming through our doors, and we have very good leaders on the corporations. Every time I find someone in the Hartford Hospital or Prudential or Travelers, the big corporations, I'm mentioning, oh, I was an alumni there 40 years ago, it changed my life, and it makes me so proud that we do have a lot of successful alumni out there in corporate. And this time, we have one that is going to be working in what we are working in getting more people to be educated about the issues and policy. Strong voice in the Latino community, a strong voice for women, a strong voice for everyone that is underserved, and an excellent student at that time, great person to talk. I'm sorry, I'm just going to look at the keynotes. So I'm going to introduce you Virginia Kase, which is now the new CEO of the League of Women Voters, and she's our alumni that moved up all the way to the top at the national level, which we are very proud of her. She's just assumed that role in July, and she is very timing. It's the 100th anniversary of the League, so they have only 60 years on us. The center, and but previously she was the CEO of Casa of Maryland, which is a great organization in the area of Maryland. I know they expanded to other states. I follow what they're doing because they are very innovative about how they work with the immigrant population and other underserved minorities. But now she is moving to the national level, and she originally, when she came to us many years ago, she went and did all graduated, went to the insurance company, but she was a leader, and she even co-founded a youth program back then, and she hasn't stopped, and we thank her for doing that from the nothing early. Now she lives in Maryland. She has 2 children, and she, with her fiance, and she has a rescue dog, Boss, as part of the family. And I'm just going to let her talk to you about who she is and why she's here, and we're going back. Virginia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming today. Jenny, thank you so much. And I want to thank all the panelists and the volunteers who put this event together. As Jenny mentioned, I actually graduated from the Puerto Rican Forum in 1989, which sounds like a really long time ago because it makes me feel kind of really old now that I look back and I'm thinking that is kind of a long time ago. But Hartford was a different place back then. For anybody who lived in Hartford knows Hartford Right on the corner of Park and Washington, there used to be a pharmacy with a Kentucky Fried Chicken next door. And the Puerto Rican Forum was upstairs, above that pharmacy where the classes actually took place. It's no longer there, it's a Walgreens now, I believe, but that's the corner where I took my classes. At that time, Hartford was in severe trouble, quite honestly. Teenage pregnancy was at an all-time high. Gang violence was at an all-time high. Education, there were I believe it was like 53% of adults over the age of 18 did not have a high school diploma. And so it was a different time in the city, but not so very different, unfortunately. Often you look and you see that some of the problems we find are cyclical. And so there needs to be solutions. And many of those solutions are here in the city with all of the diversity of culture, of information, and oftentimes people don't look to the people who are inside the city for the solutions that exist. And when they do look inside, it's then making sure that the investments into programs like the Center for Latino Progress and other organizations that are doing this good work. I am now the CEO of the League of Women Voters of the United States. I'm really proud to have been able to say that I started at the Puerto Rican Forum, and that was a launching pad for me on my career. Co-founded a youth-led nonprofit, worked for CREC for many years, the Capital Region Education Council, before moving to DC almost 16 years ago. And so I've just been growing and growing since then, but Hartford, born and bred, this is my home, my family is here in the back row. Hi guys. And so just very, very happy to be here. And the thing about the League of Women Voters, and one of the things that drew me to this organization is not only has it been in existence for nearly 100 years, but this organization was born out of the suffragist movement, out of women who were fighting for the right to vote. So the 19th Amendment will also be passed and will also be its 100th year in 2020. And there are some things that we have to acknowledge at the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters didn't do a good job when it left black women behind in the beginning. And that was something that is a stain on our history that we have been working ever since to try and rectify. And the League is an organization that is extraordinarily committed not only to making sure that people have the information that they need to be able to vote, but fighting for democracy. And I think now, more than ever, in the country that we live in, it's so polarized. It's everything on the right, everything on the left. We're looking for victims and villains every single day. If you support Republicans, you are evil. Somehow, if you support people on the left, you're part of an angry mob. And that's not the way that we treat each other as human beings. At the end of the day, we are all American citizens, and we are all fighting for the same things, and that is to have a country where people can have a good quality of life, where people can contribute to our democracy, where people feel like they have the power to control their destinies, and that the resources and opportunities that are available are available to everyone, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of your economic background, that you have the ability to help contribute to the destiny of this country and your own personal success and that of your families and communities. And so again, I just thank you. I'm excited to be here. Going on a little bit of a tour now leading up to elections with all of my league compañeras and friends. Carol Reimers is here from the League of Women Voters. I want to thank her for also supporting this event. But I'm going to get on because it's not about me. It's actually about the people who are here today. So one of those individuals is Judy Lehman. Judy's the Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Connecticut, where she researches ballot initiatives. She's an expert in this area, and so she is going to be talking a little bit about these ballot initiatives. She spent her early days in Washington, D.C., working for Quaker organizations while she was completing her master's in teaching from the Trinity College in D.C. And after teaching in public schools in D.C., where she focused on democracy, Judy shifted to career counseling work with law students and lawyers, and then she moved to Connecticut in 1984, where she's been ever since. And she currently works, her last career move was to become a public librarian, where she worked there for 7 years in Waterbury and for 5 years in Hampton. We also have, raise your hand, David left. Hey, David. David is the author of numerous essays, columns, and books on the topics of literature, history, and environmental issues. His stories have been featured in the Hartford Current, Appalachia, and other publications. He is the former Deputy Commissioner for the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection and is currently a member of the Collinsville Historic District Commission and the Town Historian and Town Meeting Manager in Canton, Connecticut. He is here today as an expert on the second ballot question regarding the transfer or conveying of state properties. We then also have Claudine Fox. Claudine has dedicated the last 10 years of her life to learning about justice and equity while simultaneously building a career in the nonprofit sector. Claudette has a BS in Public Health from Southern Connecticut State University, along with 2 years of service learning experience by way of the AmeriCorps Public Allies Program. Claudine has experience working in the world of food justice and urban agriculture, federally qualified health centers, and is now the program manager at Health Equity Solutions, a policy and advocacy nonprofit based here in Hartford. She is also the city councilwoman for the city of Hartford. I love women who run and win. And then we have, wait a second, I think 2 of my cards stuck together. Excuse me, guys. Sorry, Steve. You got stuck.
That's okay.
Steve Schrag has been a resident of Waterbury, Connecticut since 1980. Professionally, he's been a community organizer. He has been an industrial baker, health and safety specialist, education and hazardous materials coordinator, and is currently a union education and safety director. Let me get away from that.
I know
Poor thing,
I don't know
sorry.
what that was.
Through research, education, organizing, and action, he has dealt with infrastructure issues such as traffic impact studies, water, sewer systems, brownfield reclamation, garbage and power generation facilities, and alternative energy proposals. He has been a member of numerous organizations that work on transportation and environmental issues, and he is here today as an expert on the first ballot question regarding the transportation lockbox. So, now that my things have been shuffled around, I am going to find those actual questions. And here we go. So, I'm going to start with Judy. Judy, describe this special transportation fund ballot question for us.
I'd be happy to do that, Virginia, but I think that Steve has a lot more information. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
What I really want to emphasize first is that both ballot questions are going to be constitutional amendments if we approve them. And having constitutional amendments in this state is very rare. It takes a long time to get them to where they are right now. And that's what I want to emphasize, that there's a bipartisan members of the General Assembly over many years.
Can I have the microphone
Yes.
for a minute? I think the room is small enough. Do you think we can do it without the microphone?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Great. Perfect.
Because I don't want any deaf people on my conference.
Way over 85 decibels. And we don't have any.
Next time we're using
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so either a 3/4 majority in both chambers had to approve this legislation before it came to us, or in 2 consecutive sessions, a simple majority had to approve. So the people that we already elected have told us that they think these are both very important to us. And so the League of Women Voters of Connecticut has been working on both of these issues with a lot of allies and partners since at least 2012. And so I would recommend a yes vote on both of them and because they represent democracy in action, good government in action, oversight of the process, and public involvement in a very open and transparent way. So the first ballot question, I will just summarize. It does involve the Special Transportation Fund or the lockbox. And Steve here has a great deal of information about it. And I think
Go ahead, Steve, why don't you take it over and tell us about this special...
Well, actually, I'm going to start by actually reading the actual language, because it's always important to know exactly what you're looking at on the ballot. And just so you know, it'll be the far right part of the ballot, just like it was in 2014. I've been efforting to try to get sample ballots, which has not been so easy. But usually what it is, you start on one side with the governor, and you work your way across, and there'll be two questions on the last column on the right. And this is important because it's important for people to actually vote on it, not just vote yes, because if we don't get enough votes, it won't pass. I believe that's what happened with the early voting amendment a few years ago, that we got a majority voted for it, but not enough people voted in the actual question. So it's not just getting a majority, we need enough people to vote in it. So here's what the question says. Shall the Constitution of the state be amended to ensure that all monies contained in the Special Transportation Fund be used solely for the transportation purposes, including the payment of debts of the state incurred for transportation purposes, and that sources of funds deposited in the Special Transportation Fund be deposited in said fund so long as such sources are authorized by statute to be collected or received by the state. You can tell that was written by a lawyer. Okay? All lawyers, excuse me. But in any case, so the idea of this is that there are monies that are collected. As you can see my little lockbox here, I've got the various kinds of funds that go into this. They're monies that are collected from us that are supposed to go to help rebuild and protect our infrastructure, both mass transit and highways and bridges. The problem is, when the legislature has a challenge balancing its budget, what does it do? Sweep. I think the word is sweep is the word they use, which is an interesting term. They sweep the funds. And they did this a couple of years ago. So the two main reasons why this is a good idea is, one is when this money that we all pay goes into special transportation funds, it will stay there in order to make sure that it's used only for transportation, not for other things. Now, my interest in this, I'm active in a group, in a Connecticut roundtable on the environment and jobs. We are interested in this for two reasons. One is, this is to make sure there's money for mass transit so that we begin to find new ways to reduce our focus on carbon and cars and find other ways of protecting our environment. Plus, this is the best way to create directly from government money for good jobs for people in Connecticut. Now, those are two good reasons why you should vote for it. I was advised that I need to give you the other side as well, which is great, because I have no problem doing that. I was in a debate club in high school, and we always had to argue both sides. So some claim that that the legislature will find a way to get around loopholes. They will find loopholes in that language that I just read you, that the legislature will still find a way to get into it. And they also, some people will say, that it sets a precedent for sort of segregating funds so that everybody will have their own little segregated funds as opposed to a general fund that will fund everything that we need. Now that I've given you the other side, I want to give a response to that. And the response to that is, the answer is, of course, that's true. And I always tell people, it really doesn't matter just what you do on that first Tuesday in November. You have to work on the first Wednesday of November. It is up to us to make sure the legislators follow what we say. If we are successful in passing this ballot measure, we need to call our legislators the next say is, don't dip into that fund. Let's find ways to make sure that that fund stays the way we want it.
Great. So I have a question. Claudine, this one's for you, actually. What does this mean specifically for people who live here in Hartford? Can you talk about what this fund would do to support Hartford?
Yeah, so FYI, I've only been on city council for 3 months, just throwing that out. And so I have a lot of thoughts around the transportation lockbox. You know, what it kicks up for me is thinking about just the history of transportation, the history of highway management, the history around how highways have been built in urban cities and marginalized communities, and how they have been used effectively to separate out certain folks and communities from other pieces of communities. And so, you know, I think paying attention to the language, and as Steve said, continuing to hold our legislators accountable to what they are supposed to do, advocating, organizing, doing all of those things to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself is really, really important. Because as we see now with Hartford, you know, we do have communities that are separated out by major highways and major constructions. You know, we do deal with the health impacts of having a lot of cars and a lot of transit in the city. Hartford has really ridiculously high asthma rates. And so making sure that we're paying attention to not only having this money going towards, you know, building another lane on our roads, you know, street management and bridge management is really, really important. And it's important to ensure that we're creating a city that is walkable, a city that is public transportation friendly, a city that does pay attention to the people that lives here and not the commuters coming in to use our city and park in our parking garages and use those spots, which is great. You need that for a vibrant city. And we need to pay attention to the folks that live here that are impacted by these issues every day. And in thinking about the environmental factors and the health factors of creating more space for cars to drive through our city is something that you know, we just need to continue to hold our legislators accountable to make sure that doesn't happen.
And it seems to me like no matter where you are in the state, in any city, whether it's Stamford, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, it's kind of the same thing, right? So another question, and I'll put this out to anybody, but what does, for those people who don't know, what does the transportation fund help pay for? Because I think a lot of people maybe assume that it's just 91 or 95, but can somebody share with us a little bit about why we need to protect this? What does this cover? What does this fund support?
It can in fact be 91 and 95, but it can also be mass transit. It could also be, you know, the busway. It can be lots of different things to get people out of cars. And also things that, you know, again, it's up to us to push the legislators to use it for this, but it could also be for things like making sure there's pedestrian safety inside of cities, right? That's where people live, that we find ways to calm traffic. It's an issue in my town. I live in Waterbury, and we have lots of areas where people are very concerned about traffic that is in fact going too fast in neighborhoods where there are kids and whatnot, and pedestrians have been hit. So theoretically, but a lot of that is about that's that first Wednesday in November. Once the money is there, it's up to us to make sure that we push legislators to spend it the right way.
And so, in some cases, I've heard that there's consideration about putting tolls back on Connecticut highways. If that was to happen, would those funds then go back into this fund?
Nope.
Or, nope?
Nope. Tolls are a completely separate subject. As a matter of fact, tolls, if they were established, because it has to do with the federal government, they would actually have their own lockbox. Any toll money would actually be designated for separate funds based on the federal government giving us an exemption. So it has nothing to do with the state's version of this.
So anybody who says to you, well, we need these tolls because it's going to be for this, that's not accurate.
That is incorrect.
Heard the correct information here, folks. Is there anything else that any of you feel is extraordinarily important? I know we have a limited time for this, so I want to make sure we have time for discussion as well. But is there anything else that any of you can think of that is really important to mention about this particular ballot initiative?
300 deficient bridges in Connecticut, and I apologize, I was trying to make it bigger, but these are all the towns that have bridges that are deficient. They need work. I think only if you live in this upper corner and you only go to Massachusetts, New York, and you avoid a bridge that's not good. And so anybody who drives in Connecticut, anybody who cares about buses that drive on roads in Connecticut or bridges. This is everybody's issue.
Who determines when a bridge or any infrastructure is deficient?
Let's see, whose report am I looking at here? This is from the TRIP. What is TRIP? I got a report here. This is all about Connecticut bridges. This is a report they put out.
Just on the bridges.
Yeah, this is Connecticut. This is about bridges in Connecticut. They do a report nationally, and they break it out by state of bridges that are basically deficient. Unfortunately, I drive on the Mixmaster in Waterbury every day. It's a deficient.
So we're going to hold some questions till the end because we do have still need some time to discuss the next ballot question. And so, talking about the Connecticut State Properties ballot question. So, David, I'm going to hand this over to you. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. Just by a show of hands, how many people think that our state parks and forests are protected forever? How many people think they're protected forever? Really? No one. I'm amazed. You're a bunch of cynics. That's right. Well, most people who go to our state parks and forests do think that, and but in the weirdness of the legislative process, forever is not in perpetuity. Every year there's a bill in the legislature called the Conveyance Act, and it has a whole list of different properties that might be available to swap or sell or give away to municipalities, private individuals, developers. And that legislation every year contains some provision to give away parts of our state parks and forests. Every year there's something in there. They don't always pass, but there's always something in there. And there is no other way to stop it except with a constitutional amendment. Why? Because that bill every year starts with this language. Notwithstanding any provision of the general statutes to the contrary. So it doesn't matter what a previous legislature has done. It doesn't matter that there is other laws that protect state parks and forests. They can be given away, sold, traded. And the laws aren't really effective to protect them. Now, what this constitutional amendment would do would ensure that there be a public hearing on every such proposal, that it be in a single bill so that it can't be buried in some must-pass legislation that has to go forward. And finally, if it's land that belongs to the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, our parks and forests, or the Department of Agriculture, our precious agricultural lands, it will require a 2/3 vote of each house of the legislature. Now, a lot of these provisions in the bill, there's a public hearing on the bill. The bill goes, 20 or more provisions, so they're very long public hearings. But the real kicker is that at the end of the legislative session, in the last few days, when they run through the night until midnight on the last day, there's amendments proposed. And often those amendments are to give away our state parks and forests. And there's no public hearing, there's no public notice, no one knows about it. There's an old legislative axiom that says that there is no bill so bad that an amendment can't make it worse. And this is a prime example of that. So this bill is about transparency in government. It's about you having a voice in public property of all sorts, and especially for our state parks and forests. These lands don't belong to some legislator as a calling card of constituent service. They belong to all the people here and forever, to our children, our grandchildren, and their children. These lands are places where we go to seek mental respite, to challenge our bodies. We need these places in an increasingly frenetic and developed world. And this amendment is the only way to do it. Unlike Steve, I don't have faith that reading it will tell you what it does, because as he said, it's done by lawyers. And frankly, I graduated from law school 40 years ago, and I don't quite get exactly how the Secretary of the State's office came up with this particular language. It's quite convoluted. But what you should know is, by passing this amendment, it will give you a voice in decisions that affect public lands of all types, and for those places where we go for recreation and to experience nature, it will require a 2/3 vote. And in a city like Hartford, which has beautiful parks, from Keady Park in the north to Goodwin Park in the south, I've been to them all, they're beautiful. But it's a small city, it's densely populated, and the people in the city have a right to be able to go out to larger landscapes where they can enjoy with their families the beauty of this state of Connecticut. People criticize our state. The labor costs are high, they don't like the taxes, transportation infrastructure is falling apart, as you just heard. But the natural beauty so close to everyone is something that makes our state very special. There are few places in the world where you can enjoy culture, as in a city like Hartford, and then in the evening, and that day, earlier, have been walking in a near wilderness or paddling a wild and scenic river. We live in a very special place, and we need to protect it. The Connecticut Constitution has been amended 31 times since it was adopted in 1965. So while this is an extraordinary measure and the only way to control legislators who in backroom deals give away our state parks and forests, it nevertheless is not so rare that we ought to be afraid to engage in it. People want to know what the other point of view is, what the opposition has to say. Well, I'm proud to say that there is no organized opposition. But who is the opposition? It would be legislators that don't want to give up their prerogative, and there are few of those because it passed unanimously in the Senate and by a wide margin in the House of Representatives, and developers who have eyes on those special places because they want to build a restaurant or a hotel or something because it's beautiful and people want to go there. We should have those places, not now, but forever. Thank you.
One of the things that, just to piggyback a little bit, as somebody who was a teen mom and a single mom, oftentimes my kids, their memories of summer is going down to Rocky Neck or going down to Old Lyme. We didn't have the ability to go on our vacation. Our vacation was a day trip to a state park. And so when you look at the affordability and being able to go and enjoy this state and all the beauty that it has to offer, can you imagine now all of a sudden if you go to Rocky Neck, you have to book a hotel reservation, or you have to pay for a private beach? And I think that's what you're saying we want to be able to prevent.
Absolutely, because we want to be able to have places where we can go in nature and to have good outdoor recreation without belonging to the country club or some other privileged society that owns land privately. These are public lands. They belong to all of us, and we need to protect them.
You should run for office.
And so, Judy, can you do me a favor? Can you just give me a quick recap on the league's position on both of these, and when people go to see their ballots, what they need to look for? Because it seems to me like I heard somebody say that just voting yes isn't good enough, that there's a special place you have to look at. Am I considering correct?
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, that's really important. I'm very concerned about the legal language that's used in these things. It's ballot question. They're called on your ballot. As Steve said, they are going to be on the right. I checked this out. At least on Trumbull's ballot, they're going to be on the right.
Can you talk a little louder?
Oh, yes. Thank you. The place to vote these ballot questions will most likely be on the right side of your ballot. Ballot question 1 is the lockbox one, and ballot question number 2 is the public lands question. And you will have an opportunity to vote yes or no on both of those. So there are all these amendment, legislation, bill, law is thrown around, but on the ballot, it's called ballot question. That's really important.
If you get an absentee ballot, they have it on there. You
Okay,
see
good.
it. So if you If you go to other talks, you could bring in the absentee ballot.
You know, and a majority vote will pass the bill.
There's not a requirement about percentage, but why did the early voting one fail in 2000?
They didn't, I don't think they got enough votes actually.
Now, and David has to go, so I wanted to know if anybody
Didn't win
has a
majority.
quick question for David, real
Sure.
quickly, before he heads out.
Yeah,
the
I
door.
have another speaking engagement, so I really apologize. Yes, sir.
David, I go down to the LB and testify all the time.
Good for you.
But the problem is the national parks are there all the time. The problem is when Blumenthal and everybody else says, we want to build Dillon Stadium, build soccer. But the original Cove Park, what it was a garden. Whereas they don't like that. But the problem is the original trust is when you vacate that and they make it a national park, which the National Rangers are there, they differ. Because what you're doing is bringing in more crime. Because you can go to Cove Park or anybody and they're doing heavy drugs. There's needles everywhere. There's booze bottles there on Sunday because they have the Puerto Rican park baseball league, and it's loaded with booze and it's loaded with drugs. So
Okay,
you
so what
got
I
to
want
really
to do
protect
though
it.
is let's just break the question up, because I think one is about crime and safety concerns.
I mean, we
so
have-
I'd like
we
to
have
be able
to
to
fight
just
for the
separate those
safety of our
questions out. And
I would just say, you keep expressing your views at the LOB and everywhere
Well, I
else.
filed a federal lawsuit.
There were some other questions though. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if you could give examples of property that's been given away why this is needed.
Okay, well, I like to be forward-looking and not backward-looking in this. But, you know, I'll just, the most famous one is the notorious Haddam land swap. Some people may have heard about that. That actually passed the legislature, was signed by the governor, and that would have given away 17 acres along the Connecticut River in Haddam, right across from the Goodspeed Opera House, in exchange for some back forest land of much lesser value. Fortunately, the deal ultimately fell apart, but that is a good example. But, you know, there are pieces of Hammonasset State Park, the beach park, have been given away to municipalities. In the last few years, there was a proposal to give away 4 acres of Silver Sand State Park as a parking lot, and 100 acres of Centennial Watershed State Forest in Fairfield, 8 acres of Shade Swamp in Farmington to a private cemetery association. So there's just some examples. Every year there's some examples, and even the ones that don't pass use up a lot of time and energy of our environmental and conservation organizations, time and energy that would be better spent doing other things, because they have to do this to oppose those things. But yes, every year there's something. It doesn't always pass, thank goodness.
there was another question in the back.
I had the same question.
Okay.
Okay,
Jenny?
great.
Yeah, quickly, this is not only about forest and state park, but also about state building.
Yes. It's about all state property which you, as residents of this state, have a right to make a comment on, to let your views be known. Now, the only thing, the difference with state parks and forests is that it will require a 2/3 vote of the legislature. But there is administrative processes among the state agencies that allow the transfer or the sale of land. It is a public process that invites people to say their mind. It gives public notice. The problem with the legislative process is very often there's no opportunity to speak out, and there's not even any public notice. So this won't stop the legislature from doing this, but at least you will have a voice. And it won't stop property from being transferred because there are administrative processes that safeguard the public opportunity to speak and have a say.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can state agencies that control property, can they sell it without the legislature's approval?
If they go through an administrative process outlined in statute that provides for public notice and public input.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? Dave, thank you so much.
You're
I know you
very
gotta
welcome.
go. We're gonna let you get out of here.
Thank you.
Questions for Steve? Does anybody have any questions for Steve on transportation? Ma'am, right here?
Yes, Steve. My name is Rose. I'd like to ask you, you mentioned the special lockbox. transportation, special transportation fund. Don't we already have a transportation?
We have a special transportation fund.
Yeah.
But
So
what
what's
this
the
will do,
difference between
what
that
the
and the
difference is,
regular one?
all the money that goes into that fund is supposed to be used for transportation purposes.
Yeah.
What this will do is amend the state constitution so the legislature will not be able to, by statute, take money out of it.
So, is it still going to be a regular transportation
It's the
fund?
same, it's the
Special
same
transportation
fund.
It's the same fund, yes,
Same
that's correct.
fund. It's just called the lockbox because it's sort of a quicker
Okay.
name.
It's a constitutional amendment so they will not be able to just sweep the money.
So how are they going to fund this?
Same ways that they do right now. If you want a portion of the sales tax, motor vehicle fines, oil products profit tax, there's a list of about 7 different funds, taxes that we already pay, taxes we pay that are supposed to go into that fund and stay there.
So it's just making sure there's no sneaky way of pulling it out. It's not a different fund, it's making sure that people can take it out or say, yeah, we're gonna do this with it instead. It actually puts some protections in place. Now, real quickly, because I wanna make sure there's a little bit of time. Claudine, I'm really curious, for those of people who don't live in Hartford, and there are some people here who don't, but I want you to talk as a city council person a little bit about Hartford, some of the misconceptions people have about Hartford, and what is Hartford? Hartford is on the rise, right? What are you trying to do here in Hartford? Why should people who don't live in Hartford care about what's happening here in the city?
Oh boy.
Go ahead.
Okay. So that question is like a mixed bag for me, right? You want me to stand up? Okay. So, hello everybody. So that question's a mixed bag for me. I have been living in Hartford for about 9 years or so. I'm not born and raised, but I'm surrounded by many people that are born and raised Hartford residents. And I'm continued to be blown away by the folks that are born and raised and their commitment to the city and their commitment to the arts and their commitment to justice and their commitment to equity and their commitment to making sure that the residents here are able to live happy and healthy lives just like everybody else around them gets to live. Hartford has a lot of great things going on and has always had a lot of great things going on. I don't think anything has really changed about that except for, you know, the fact that we have a baseball stadium, but the process to get to the baseball stadium was mixed. And so I'm answering the question as truthfully as possible because I don't want to be the kind of person that's just up here that's like, downtown is great, forget about the rest of the city around it. Because downtown is great, but a lot of the other neighborhoods in Hartford, Frog Hollow, Clay Arsenal, Southwest, all of those other neighborhoods are also great and also have really beautiful and vibrant things that are happening within them and have always been happening within them. The difference is now that there's like a flashlight on Hartford because we've got the baseball stadium and downtown is sprucing up and all of that. I say if you want to come and enjoy Hartford, you have to be able to see the people that live here. And that's always going to be like my motto, is that like Hartford isn't Hartford without the history and the community includes Black and non-Black people of color that live here. And so we have to be able to see them as people and recognize them as humans that contribute to the city. And when we start doing that, then I think people will really be able to buy into what Hartford has to offer. Right now, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but people live here, eat, sleep, breathe, and die here, and you gotta see them in order to really buy into what we are.
Thank you so much. I just never really understood that because I think I probably have walked the majority of this city. And I turned out to be pretty okay, and I'm not dead. So, you know, I think just to make sure that people come. I want to make sure that I have a little bit of time because we do need to close out in just 5 minutes. I want to be respectful of people's time. But one of the things that I think is one of the most important things for me at the League of Women Voters is making sure that people know how to access information, are prepared for election day. We have some really important deadlines that are coming up. October 30th, right, is the voter registration deadline in Connecticut.
Yes, online and by mail.
Online and by mail. There is also same-day voter registration in Connecticut, but it's not going to be at your polling location. There are special locations.
Depends on what town and city you're in. There'll be election day registration.
Exactly.
But it may take more time, but if you'll register now, it's easier than if you wait.
So I do want to give a pitch, and I'm hoping that somebody from the league can talk a little bit about this, because I want to make sure everybody has a plan for Election Day. If you're not registered to vote, make sure you're registered. Check your voter registration status. Look, voter purging, there are all kinds of things that happen. People go and they find out when they get there, my last name changed, I got married, or I moved down the street, I'm in a different congressional district. There are all kinds of things that can happen to prevent people from being able to be able to cast their ballot, and we don't want that to happen to anybody here. So I want to make sure there's also some time to answer questions about voting, where to get the information, and I want to make sure that everybody here commits to bringing somebody to the polls on Election Day, or helping them to do the things that they need to do to make sure that they are able to cast their ballot. So do you want to get up there a little bit?
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura Smits. I'm the voter service person from the League of Women Voters in Connecticut. And the October 30th deadline is for online and by mail. So if you're mailing in a voter registration card to your town or city hall, and it has a postmark of October 30th, it will count. If you go online, if you have a DMV issued driver's license, then a driver's license, a Connecticut issued state ID, you can go online, www.voterregistration.ct.gov, and you can do it right there. It does not take long, and you will put all your information in, and because you're putting it in, it won't be wrong. Whereas if you go to a person like me and I put it in, I might transpose a number or whatever, so it's much safer and much easier to do it online. And then you will get a letter from your registrar accepting your registration and telling you where your polling place is. And if you live in a big place, a big city, you may have 2 different polling places depending on what year it is. Even year, somewhere you go to one place, odd years you go to a different place. So I urge you to check out our website. I have these little cards that happen to have our website. We have links to all of these things on our website. Most of this stuff can be done on the Secretary of State's website, sotes.ct.gov. But we also have all of that information about the questions and about absentee voting and everything you can possibly answer. But I'll try to answer any question you have right now. Do you have a question?
Well, just a comment. That whole thing about election day snafus and absentee thing. 2012 presidential election. I voted in my local district at Hartford CT for years. And then I go there, they find that my name isn't on the list. I'm like, well, that's weird. Last time I voted here. And we did this whole rigmarole, and they found out, oh, you've been moved to the United Way on Laurel Street.
A different polling place.
Yeah, didn't get any notice, didn't get anything. And I usually check for those things when they say you register for your, to make sure you are still a resident of your address. And I always send those little cards and didn't get any notification they changed it. And it's a thing that is serious because I was pressed for time on election day. I was a college student at the time, and I had a class that day. I told my professor I was going to be late, possibly, but I would still come to class. And it made me later than I wanted to be. And so the thought did cross my mind saying, no, I just won't vote this time. I said, no, I'm here, I'm going to vote. If I'm on Laurel Street, that's fine. But it's that thing of, it does cross your mind not to bother. And then some people don't even get to the polling place. But imagine if you get to the place, you're all set to do it, and then you can't because somebody did something that you didn't know about. I would have gone to Laurel Street had I known, but I didn't know.
There's a lookup tool.
Yeah.
On the website, on that Secretary of State.
So, yeah.
Am I registered? And
Ever,
you can check that.
Ever since
and
then.
it'll tell you, right. It'll tell you.
I've been like checking, what are they? Because that had never been, I had heard about people having issues, but then that was me. And then I'm like, okay, no. Too many people put their neck
That is
on the
why
line.
the League of Women Voters is also, we've been working hard to get early voting. You heard us talk about early voting before, and that is one of the key issues for us is that access. We don't like that these different models of voter suppression where people have to go around and try to get to it and then make a decision not to vote. So so we are all about trying to get more access and more opportunities for you to vote, but we need these kind of stories to hear these stories because then we can share that with the legislators.
And don't forget that we have 169 towns. who do everything, they do it by the Secretary of State's rules, but depending on their budget or other things, they might move things around without telling you. So it's good to check before you go.
We have another question. Sure.
Can you also talk about the provisional ballots?
Provisional ballots, because we have election day registration, we don't have a lot of provisional ballots, actually. We don't have that problem. If you do election day registration, your ballot will be counted.
Right.
Provisional ballots are very rarely used because we have election day registration.
Before there was
more.
more. Yeah.
So most, there's really not a lot of reasons for not to get your vote counted in Connecticut.
And one thing, other things I think is important I want to mention, the League does a tremendous amount of voter protection work. The League, I really encourage you, if you are not a member of the League of Women Voters in Connecticut, go on the website or talk to one of these ladies before you go, because the only way that we're going to prevent things like this from happening is from people like you being members and being out there and making sure that people's rights are protected and making sure that as many people know about the ballots. Because that's one of the challenges that we have, especially when we have very low voter turnout in cities like Hartford.
Especially in midterm elections.
Making sure people are getting the access, and these ladies, everything that they do is volunteer, and so they're taking their time, and so we need as many volunteers who can go out there and do this work and to be protecting the vote and people's right to vote. This gentleman here had another question.
Hi, Tony Schrolis. Around the issue of voter suppression in elections and low voter turnout. I live in Hartford in the 4th District, and I recently helped out with some elections volunteering with a candidate in the 3rd District, and I was, very surprised to learn more about Hartford's process, which includes a really absurd number of absentee ballots, 30%, where the state average is around 6%, and understanding how there's this machine in the old folks' homes and elderly housing that in some ways is vote steering. Also saw a lot of things at the polls that were vote steering and voter suppression type activities. And I just don't know that I saw it anywhere in the news after the election that there is a very real and present Democratic Party issue around kind of fixing elections such that no challengers can really have a fair go in the primaries. So
You're saying
I'm
you
curious
actually
about
saw voter suppression, or what do you?
Yes, people blocking the driveway to the voting areas.
Well, see, that's something that the registrars should be aware of, right?
Yeah, if they care.
That's technically illegal, you're right, there's nothing good about that.
They're nominated and elected by the state Democratic Party.
Registrars, all of them, okay, I'm not, I used to be one, so I can say that, but not in a city, so it's much more difficult with a lot of people. These stories are important, and if you have a time to send an email to Secretary of State's office, she wants to know, or us too, we'll take those stories to her. Some of the things are questionable, and that's really the most I can really say about that, without knowing the individual circumstances.
And the importance of the community organizing. So the League nationally has engaged in many litigation efforts, fighting gerrymandering, fighting against voter suppression. And so organizations like the League, that's our job. And the League is nonpartisan. We do not support or endorse any candidate for political office or political parties. We are a political organization in that we do support issues like fighting against gerrymandering, getting money out of politics, things like that. But when it comes to candidates and parties, we are kind of like Switzerland. We don't get involved. I heard another story from a family member who said that they were voting in Ellington, Connecticut, and there was a line for Democrats and a line for Republicans.
That's done.
And so there are things like that. And this is my own family, who's a highly educated woman, who said she felt intimidated because it was like everybody knew where she was voting. And so people need to know, who do they go to when things like that happen? Who can they call?
The registrar, I guess. The moderators, actually. Each election in every town has 1 or 2 moderators, and that's technically their job to supervise and make sure that in that polling place, the registrars who are there and the assistants who are there are doing the job correctly and overseeing. And technically, that's how it works. Whether it works honestly that way, I'm not sure.
When you go to a forum and you have the TV or basically a screen on the question, and audiences out there, and they get no participation in who we want to vote for. We can't ask the the congressman or the senator any questions because it is controlled by the media and who they control what answers and questions they will distribute. And that's against constitutional law because we have a right to ask and voice our opinion because they are not asking the right questions because they manipulate the vote themselves. Do you understand that?
I understand what you're saying. If it's a league-sponsored debate,
It
it
is,
usually
yeah,
doesn't
because the
happen.
problem is the TV is actually controlling
Right,
the vote.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
I think in
unfortunately, it's
the
against the
case
law.
where this happens, again, as Virginia said, speak out.
I did file.
Okay, good. Then that's it. We have to let people know that they're not handling things correctly. I think this lady
here and this gentleman here had two questions, so we can start with
I've had experiences like Tony in Hartford, and I guess one of my questions is, what do people have to have as a form of ID? Because I think last time I voted in Hartford, they asked for my license, and I thought that they weren't supposed to ask for that. But there's a lot of confusion at the polling places, so it's really important that we know what the truth is.
And the Secretary of State is trying to get a better feed on the poll workers, because that's about poll worker training. And really, if you're already on the list, or your name is on the list, all you have to do is show an ID that has your name on it and your signature on it. So a credit card, or whatever. It doesn't have to be, everybody reaches for their license because it's the easiest thing, right? It's the quickest thing to have. However, you don't
Isn't it
have to
just
have that.
supposed to be a piece of mail with your
It
name?
has to have your address. It
Because
has to have your address, it has to have your name.
I think what Leslie is trying to bring up is this idea around identification, and if there are undocumented folks that maybe don't have a registered state ID or anything like that, that is a form of suppression, asking them to
Well, if you're on the
undocumented.
list,
You
you're probably
can't
not
vote,
already on the
right,
list,
but
If
yeah,
you're not a
but,
citizen, you can't vote, period, so.
But, right, so I think typically it's just a piece of mail proving your address, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, again, because we have 169 ways of doing things, yes, they're supposed to do it this way. We tell them how to do it. However, it doesn't always, it's not as, some poll workers are holding on to this notion of you must have a driver's license. This has been something that's about education.
So if we see it happening in our polling place,
You should mention it to the moderator. There's always a moderator in every polling place who will want to know that kind of stuff, and they write it down in a log.
But call people on it. Never walk away and make a scene about it and make sure that others.
Sir, you really want to get involved. So this is really a question for anybody that wants to answer it. I notice at pretty much every event that I go to about getting out the vote and engagement and all of this stuff, it seems that people speak to it in a sort of traditional way, and I wonder what specific things we should do in order to engage younger people to get out the vote. I mean, we see that in the last election, for every 4 eligible, millennial voters, only 25% of them actually showed up to the midterm. Meaning, that's 75. That's a big chunk. That could be the election right there. So, what kinds of things should we do? Because the average young person is not going to be going to the registrar of voters to get registered. They're not going to be expecting mail. I know that we can register to vote online. That's what I did, and that's what I recommend a lot of people do as well. But just in general, ways to engage the younger voting population apart from things on newspapers and the like.
I think it's a longer process. I think, so when we talk about voter registration and voter engagement, I notice that these conversations don't start until like a month or 2 months before elections. And with youth, everything is a process, right? This process of engaging them as people, seeing their opinions as valuable, working with them and not telling them how to do things, but kind of helping them feel a part of the solution. And right now, I think a lot of people are apathetic because our systems are so oppressive, and we're told to do these things, and nothing comes out of it the way that you said it was going to come out. So why should I even participate, because it didn't work out in the first place? And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge all of those feelings and opinions, and not just expect youth to engage in voting because we told them to do it. So it should be a year-round process of talking to them about how important local elections are, because maybe they can't really see the impact of national elections, and making things a little bit more tangible for folks. is what I see. So we can't start in September. We have to start in January, or we have to start November, 7th and build up to next year or whatever.
We try. But
what I will piggyback on that, and I know this lady here has a question too, but what I will say is make a plan for voting. Make sure that you are literally dragging people. I drag my kids to vote. They cannot come back home if you have not showed them. And they get frustrated sometimes. Mom, I have school, I have work. Well, guess what? The polls are open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. You're going to take your butt down the street and you're going to cast your ballot, whether you like it or not. Let's go over the sample ballot so you can see. Let's go and see who's running. Because I take it really seriously, and that's, I think, one of our responsibilities as parents, to teach our kids the importance of voting. But also, not everybody has parents who have been engaged voters. And one thing I will say for anybody who's working with the Puerto Rican community, the island of Puerto Rico does not have a vote. And so it is important for every single person who has been impacted. I was at that island, and it brings me to tears the things that I saw when I was there. I see people who do not have a voice, and so many people have been displaced, and they are here in Hartford. They are here in other parts of the country. And because they have not voted before, they need a buddy. They need somebody who's going to take their hand, walk them through it, and show them what needs to be done. And so it's something extremely important.
I have to tell you something. My experience with people voting is people will find a way to get to the polls if there's somebody running for office that they care about. It isn't just a mechanical thing of saying, oh, we need to tell you when the polls are open and what questions are on the ballot. People have to feel that they have a reason to go to the polls. I've seen elections, without being very specific, where thousands of people registered to vote and voted because there was a candidate running who they cared about. And other times, and this is the problem with midterms, lots of times people don't see candidates that they care enough about to spend the time. Lots of people, millennials, will find time to get to Apple Store to get a new phone. They'll stand online to get a new phone. They would stand online to vote if there was somebody that they cared enough about to vote for.
Well, having said that one thing, though, you still have to vote even if the politicians aren't the ones you necessarily
Well,
like.
you and I think that, but I'm just saying my experience is...
I'm actually taking this from Samantha B. You all know who Samantha B. is? She's a younger person than me, and she basically said, not people are perfect, politicians aren't perfect. You have to find somebody who's close enough to what you believe, and then believe in them, and then show up to vote.
In this case, you're preaching to the choir. I registered when I was 18 and I voted in every single election, but that's atypical. That is not what a lot of other
people do. With regard to your question about younger people, we've reached out to the college campuses, the community colleges. This summer, the Parkland survivors had a bus tour, and they went all over the country. They ended up in Newtown. We were there, and there was a lot of kids who had never even thought about it, and they were registering to vote in droves, and they were getting excited about participating. How do we get that year-round is a good question and definitely a goal.
So we have two last questions, and then we're going to start to wrap things up. So this lady right here.
Okay, I just wanted to say about getting younger people to engage in voting. My daughter's 20, and it's a hassle for her to vote because she has to do it by absentee ballot. She's not going to be coming home in the middle of the week to go vote. But she said to me, why do I have to bother with this? I don't care. I'm going to leave Connecticut. I hate it. There's an asshole here. Everything sucks. So I said to her, you have to care because, yes, it does suck here. But if you don't vote, if you don't change it, and then you just go somewhere else, which you think you're planning on doing as soon as you graduate college, you're going to go move somewhere else, and then you're not going to vote there, and it's just going to become another Connecticut. Then it's going to spread because you don't care about it, and then the whole country's going to become another Connecticut. So you're living in Connecticut, the whole nation, because you don't care. And all of you 20-year-olds are living in this state, in this whole state of affairs, because you don't care about what's going on around you, and you don't want anything to change because you didn't get involved, you didn't care. So your vote does matter. Get out. And she voted last week.
Is there a plan to promote these questions, because I'm concerned that I'm very knowledgeable and I watch the news and I read the paper and I really follow everything. I wasn't really familiar that these two questions were going to be on the ballot until I saw this meeting today. So is there a plan to promote this so that enough people can vote so that they can pass?
Well, we have put it out to our news media, to all our chapters, and hopefully they're doing that in individual towns and cities. We have it available wherever we go to voter registration drives. We always have our information, and a lot of it's on our website.
There are the organizations that...
Right.
Well,
we have to rely on each
I'd like to get a real quick plug-in before people leave. Anybody who supports the lockbox, what I would like to do before you leave is take a picture of you standing behind the lockbox, which is what I have done in lots of places in Connecticut, and I spread those pictures around so people understand that people need to vote on this, and there are lots of people who support it.
So, but you're right, it is a little bit of a mystery still, and so that's why we've sort of taken it on as something we really want to promote. And I urge all of you to do the same thing. I mean, make sure that the people in your family and your friends and your community know that these questions are coming up and what they're about. Because the other thing that happens is sometimes people feel they don't know what it's about, so they don't vote at all.
Right.
And then we run into the problem where it doesn't pass and then it's not fixed. So, please share whatever information you got here. We have some pamphlets out there on the table that explain them. So please share them as widely and as far as you can.
I also just want to mention on the 29th of this month, Hartford Vota is having a similar event talking about the ballot questions.
Yes.
It's at the Harvard Public Library at 6 o'clock. So if you want to further the discussion or invite the people you know to that event, the 29th of this month at Harvard Public Library at 6 o'clock.
So we want to thank everybody. I know there are plenty of questions, and there are experts around here. I want to tell you that if you want to speak to folks afterwards and ask your individual questions, we have plenty of people here. Everybody up here is ready to answer those questions, except I don't know. I'm sorry, I live in Maryland now, so I don't know all the answers. So I'm not the right person. But we want to thank the Center for Latino Progress, Johnny. Thank you so much for the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs, Everyday Democracy, Forest and Park, and of course, my colleagues, the League of Women Voters. Thank you all so much for putting this together. Thank you for